Hey everybody, Mike Harrelson here with Article 2 Industries again. I want to introduce you to a special member of the Article 2 team. You're going to see a lot of him. Welcome, Mike Ricker.
Thank you.
Mike, great to have you today.
Thank you.
Mike, we're going to talk about, you have an extensive bio, so I want to dig into that a little bit rather than just introduce you and run that down. In 1981, you started a law enforcement career in a pretty rough part of Oklahoma.
Well, Oklahoma City, I mean, I don't know how rough it was, but it was a lot of fun. It was a great place for a young man to start a law enforcement career. Pushed a patrol rig there for about 2.5 years.
See some action?
Oh, plenty. You know, as a uniform officer, you see all sorts of different things, domestics, you know, fights, things of that nature.
You became a firearms instructor shortly after that.
I did. While I was there, I expressed an interest in firearms, and the chief at the time let me go to the Council on Law Enforcement Education and Training Center to become a certified firearms instructor for the state, which allowed me to help teach at my local PD. It was a real good real good environment to learn in. It was low stress. Back then we only had one type of weapon. It was a revolver and a shotgun, and that was about it. A lot of fun.
Kept it simple.
Yeah, the simple's best.
Excellent. You had an interesting career switch that's backwards of most guys. You went from law enforcement into the military. How did that happen?
Well, I was fortunate enough to have a lot of friends on the PD. They grew up with me. They acted as my older brothers, my mentors. They knew my career aspirations was federal law enforcement. So together with them, we formulated a plan that would assist me in making a more attractive resume for federal law enforcement. And back then, the DEA was the place to go. So
outstanding.
that's what we did.
You didn't not just join the military, but you had some high-speed fun there. You became an Airborne Ranger.
Yeah, part of the program was to enlist, go into a special operations field, and for me, I chose Ranger. I was there at the opening of the 3rd Ranger Battalion, and then shortly thereafter, I picked up my commissioning program, became an officer in military intelligence, and then went back to the Rangers. And unfortunately, as things would have it, I received some substantial injuries that, you know, made me leave the Ranger Battalion, and I joined the mainstream military at that point.
While you did that, you not only were a shooter, but you became a coach on several rifle and pistol teams.
Yeah, you know, it's one of those things where a bad thing leads to inadvertent good things. I was crushed that I had to leave special operations, but at the same time, it gave me exposure to participating in rifle and pistol teams. At the time, the rifle and pistol teams were unit level. We participated in division-wide and corps-wide competitions. They typically chose the people with some experience to help mentor the younger shooters, the less experienced shooters. And I was fortunate enough to be part of that.
Excellent. From there, you did make that transition into the DEA.
Yes.
While with the DEA, not only were you a federal firearms instructor at that point, you also became point man on a raid team.
Yeah, back in those days, DEA was very active, and we took a lot of pride in completing our own cases. When we adopted a case or whenever we began a case, we saw it through the entire case, raid, prosecution, the whole 9 yards. And that meant we manned our own raid teams. And the DEA Academy is a very arduous academy. It's several months long in Quantico, Virginia. The bulk of your training is in firearms, self-defense, and basically defense tactics, and tactical applications. In other words, raids, because that was our focus. We didn't want to see anybody get hurt in raids, so we became very, very proficient, and that's how we managed that. I was very lucky. Those days, unfortunately, might be gone for the DEA.
You left the DEA, you moved over, you had great careers with BLM and with Forest Service in law enforcement capacities.
I did. Just the way that my career unfolded, I took a position with the Forest Service Law Enforcement as the supervisor over their national laboratory for technology development for law enforcement. I had some technology development in my background. But during that time, I was fortunate enough to go to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center and receive my credentials from Homeland Security as a firearms instructor. So I pursued my firearms instruction certification and my firearms instructor development also through the Forest Service.
Very good. And then, oddly enough, in a weird twist, completely ironic, you go from enforcement and come full circle into civil code
Yeah.
enforcement for legalized marijuana grows.
It is kind of funny the way life takes you, but whenever I came out to Northern California with the Forest Service, it was underneath the auspices that I continue my drug enforcement program and take teams into the mountains of Northern California, locate, fix, and eradicate groups that were illegally in the country growing marijuana, drug cartel groups. It was an extremely hazardous duty owing to the location, the distance from support, and typically we'd go out in small teams, and we were hunting people that were extremely hardened. A lot of times they were trained by U.S. military, the Zetas. They were trained by U.S. military, so they were militarily inclined. They used military weapons, they had night vision, and they had military-grade encryption and communications equipment in some cases. I never found any locally in Northern California, but I know in other places around the nation they do, near the border, basically. But from there, I was working with Tehama County. They asked me to come down, or I applied for a position with them, and was given the position of a code enforcement officer. So on the civilian side, not carrying a gun, not carrying a badge, my job was to go around and inspect legal medicinal marijuana grows. Of course, none of them were in compliance, very few. I think 2, in fact. But yeah, it is kind of funny the way the life takes you. But, yeah, that's how it wound up.
Fantastic. Great pedigree, blue ribbon, long resume, but more than just blow sunshine up Mike's ass. There's a reason I want to talk about that much of his bio. I want to talk about DEA and dope in particular in that agenda. So from a guy who's raiding clandestine grows now to fairly legalized marijuana, are you surprised to see marijuana become this legal and this widespread this fast?
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not surprised to see it with the amount of money that's thrown in on top of it. There are huge amounts of donations coming in from people that don't want to become arrested, people that see the gold rush out of green, if you will. They put millions of dollars into publicizing the positive aspects of marijuana. I'm not going to say that marijuana doesn't have any positive aspects. Early in our century, earlier in the 1900s, when you could get laudanum over the counter, heroin, basically, you didn't have to have a license, you didn't have to have a prescription, you could just go buy it. Well, the government came in and determined that wasn't good for us. But rather than outlawing it, they just didn't allow you to go and buy it. They researched it, and from there we have our common modern pain medication. There might be some compounds in marijuana that might be beneficial, but to say that it's medicinal at this point is a farce. It's not. It's just people wanting to be able to smoke marijuana without the fear of being arrested, or sell marijuana for tax-free income that doesn't contribute back to their community.
Bottom line is the bottom line. Medicinal conversation aside, generates a fairly large amount of revenue from the compliant growers. But even with the compliant growers, there's still a large issue with Mexican nationals and cartels with clandestine green dope grows, yes?
Yes, there is, and I might deviate a little bit from what some of the compliant growers. I have yet to see a compliant grower fully exercise the regulated requirements. There's taxation involved, and people don't pay their taxes. The amounts that they're allowed to grow far exceed any normal usage. Ergo, they aren't using it, so what are they doing? They're selling it. And they don't sell it in state, they sell it out of state. They sell it on the East Coast. That's where we find most of our marijuana grown in California. But they refer to it as California Gold or California Kush. They sell it on the East Coast for anywhere between $3,000 to $5,000 a pound, tax-free to them, which robs us of potential revenue. But the notion that you can tax somebody that's in a criminal enterprise is a joke.
Laughable.
It's a very bad joke. They're in a criminal enterprise because they don't want to comply with the law. They're not going to comply with the law. And something like marijuana that is easily grown, easily cultivated, easily manufactured and distributed, you'll never see compliance.
Going back to that pre-Clinton era into the Clinton administration era where the DEA had a focus on hard dope, in that time period from now, how has that changed with the DEA's focus?
Well, I can't speak for the politicians. I can only speak for what I've seen, Mike. The DEA, when I was involved, we were a rough and ready group. We vigorously pursued distributors, manufacturers. It didn't matter what the drug was. There was no political affiliation to a drug. Crack cocaine was virtually, now you don't read about crack cocaine because everybody that we arrested got 10 years. And that pretty much takes the incentive out of selling crack cocaine. Methamphetamine, essentially the same thing. We could do that with all drugs if the resolve was there. I'm not going to say it's not there, but I don't see it. Nowadays, DEA, my friends in the DEA tell me the same thing. They have to have a litany of approvals now before they can even leave the office. And that's no way to attack a war of any sort. I mean, your people have to be free to execute on their discretions. And we're highly trained and we're professional. We're just not seeing it.